Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. So welcome to our session today. We're going to be talking about redefining how enterprises work with Blue Prism Intelligent Automation. My name is John Day. I'm Vice President of our Technology Alliance, or ISV program, as well as our Cloud Alliances. I'll be joined on stage shortly by Greg Brett, who's our Global GM for Process Intelligence for SS&C Blue Prism, as well as Madhu Raman, who is the Worldwide Head of Intelligent Automation for AWS. So pretty straightforward agenda today. 4 topic areas we're going to try to cover. First is I'll start with a little bit of a context around what is intelligent automation, and more importantly, what are the outcomes that our customers are seeing when they take advantage of intelligent automation. Then we'll have a quick panel discussion with myself. I'll be joined by Greg and Madhu, and we'll talk about what's happening in the intelligent automation marketplace a little more broadly, and specifically what's happening around process intelligence, which is a very hot space right now. Then Greg will do a little bit of a deep dive around process intelligence and how to get started with that technology. And then we're very excited to have Johnny Ramandino, one of our partners, join us to give us both a customer and a partner perspective about leveraging intelligent automation. So first, a little bit of bad news if you're in this space. So if you're in this space at all, you'll know that you can't really mention RPA or intelligent automation without talking about its cousin, digital transformation. And what the advisory firms, what the management consulting firms are saying almost unanimously is that the majority of all transformation initiatives will fail to deliver the business results that companies are expecting. Obvious question is, why is that? And our belief, our supposition, is that it's actually very hard to do. And when you think about it, some of the underlying factors that contribute to that are, number one, there's any number of legacy systems that are still out throughout most of the enterprises globally. Those legacy systems obviously are very difficult to connect with. They're also very hard to leverage with modern systems, and to do that is obviously very cost-intensive and expensive. Second area is manual tasks. So there are still an infinite number of manual tasks that are occurring in almost every enterprise, whether it's back office or front office, opportunities for automation that have not been achieved as of yet. And then thirdly, while I think just about most enterprises today are leveraging AI and ML, a lot of those models still are unsophisticated at the level in terms of leveraging things like security and meeting compliance requirements they have, particularly in regulated industries we deal with, like financial services and healthcare. But there's some good news. And the good news is that companies with advanced automation programs will obliterate, not merely beat, the competition. So we tend to agree with Forrester Research, and a lot of that from our perspective comes down to making sure you have a top-down initiative for intelligent automation that's driven from the C-suite down. And that's not just our opinion. These are some of the results we've seen from a handful of customers. So if you start from a bottom line perspective and you think about this from a profitability or earnings per share perspective, our client ATB Financial found that they increased their revenue by $3.8 million by leveraging intelligent automation to reduce their customer attrition. Similarly, from an innovation perspective, Jaguar Land Rover found an increase of $1.25 million when they leveraged intelligent automation to develop a continuous innovation program. From a productivity perspective, particularly in the telecom space, which have massive customer center infrastructures, Telefonica found that they had an increase in productivity with their contact center team of 300% by leveraging intelligent automation in the call center specifically. And then, of course, there's some qualitative feedback, which is very encouraging. Alberta Health Services, right? I love how they're talking about that the goal of intelligent automation for them was actually to allow their employees to do what they were designed to do, which is to deliver that human element of providing clinical care. Similarly with Coca-Cola, by removing some of the more mundane tasks of their employees, they're freeing their employees up to do more creative things and develop and deliver more opportunities. So how does Blue Prism do that? So this is kind of a current state view of kind of the 4 core components of Blue Prism. The first, from a technology perspective, there's 2 main components from a product perspective. One is around process assessment, which Greg will talk about in a minute. But think of that as the opportunity to discover and analyze what particular business processes you want to automate. And do that with the knowledge of what the ROI and the return is going to be before you actually start that automation, very importantly. The second is when you're doing that, From an RPA perspective, which stands for robotic process automation, and no, that's not the robots that are running around the halls. When we say robotic process automation, we're actually referring to leveraging software and teaching our software robots how to do the tasks, quite literally, that humans would normally do. So you can think about that in a couple of contexts. So a simple financial close process at the end of the month, where it's a set of tasks that the accounting team is doing on a monthly basis, right? They're leveraging specific systems, they're doing specific analysis, and if that analysis and those systems is the same each and every time, that's a good opportunity for automation. Another classic example, employee onboarding. So how do you receive applications? How do you qualify candidates? How do you schedule interviews? All of those things are kind of classic repetitive tasks that we can automate with robotic process automation. On top of that, our software is specifically designed for non-technical users. So you've heard the term no-code, low-code. When we say no-code, we mean that very literally, which is a business user can design a very complex process without knowing a thing about how to develop or integrate with any of those systems that process may need to speak to. And then lastly, particularly important for us, again, with our regulated industries, is what we do from an access and compliance perspective. Again, we have things like an irrefutable audit trail based on logging every single interaction that both the humans that are interacting with our system, as well as what we refer to as our digital workers, are actually doing each and every step through a given process. And then we don't deliver this alone. So we're a software provider. We have a very robust partner ecosystem, not quite as robust as AWS, but we're very fortunate to have a number of partners that we leverage that are joint partners. So I won't read the list so I don't offend anybody, but very recognizable names in terms of the partners that we go to market with. And we're excited to have Invoke joining us later to give their perspective as well. So when you think about this from an AI perspective, and obviously just thinking of three AI services that hopefully some of you are familiar with: recognition from a computer vision perspective, comprehend from a natural language processing perspective, or Amazon Text Track in terms of being able to leverage documents and pull data out of unstructured data. These things lend themselves to adding on to your RPA process. So if you think of RPA as the foundation, and you add intelligence on top of that, that's how we get intelligent automation. So a couple of classic scenarios. So for example, an omni-channel scenario, right? Where you'd love to be able to leverage video or an image. A good example of that would be a claims process for insurance, for example, right? So now you can leverage machine learning to actually take advantage of understanding what that image represents, what the potential damage might be before it ever gets to a human. And then we support that human connectivity through something we call human in the loop, which is in any given process, you might need judgment or decision that the software can't make. You would then route that to a human, make the decision, and then back in to finish the process. Refund fulfillment, another classic example, particularly for NLP. Obviously, if we can understand a couple of different things, like we might have a customer service agent that doesn't speak the language of the caller. Well, if that caller can come in, we can then translate that into English, for example, respond to their complaint, and then have that response go back to the customer in their own native language. Pretty interesting. Maybe more interesting is sentiment analysis. So if we're talking about a refund in this case, and we know that they're angry, maybe we expedite the processing of that refund. So those are pretty classic examples of RPA. And then the last example, Text Track, was actually leveraged for invoice processing. This is a very real customer, and this customer in the supply chain effectively saw a reduction from $80 million to $1 million. They basically ran up their tab to 80 million because they didn't have a way to routinely and automatically process their invoices. So what does that mean from a go-forward perspective? Well, we were acquired, if folks are not aware, by SS&C at the early part of this year. And we got a number of interesting things out of that, but probably most interesting is our new integrated platform on a go-forward basis. So if you see where the stars are located on this architecture, effectively what you're seeing is through the integration with SS&C, who already had an intelligent automation practice they called Chorus, we ended up with three component parts that are now going to represent our integrated stack. The first is business process management, things like integration, orchestration, and analytics of your collection of business processes. Things like no-code through a product called UX Builder, And then really an improvement on our own intelligent document processing product. The Blue Prism product was called Decipher. We're leveraging Chorus's document automation. And what that's providing, interestingly enough, is a very good complement between processing structured data and processing unstructured data, things like handwriting analysis, which are very big in Chorus. So a number of different benefits we got through that integration from a product perspective, much less some of the other benefits of the acquisition. So that was my last introductory slide. Let me go ahead and call up to the stage Greg Brett and Madhu, and we'll have a little bit of a panel discussion.
All right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Anthony Graziano. I'm the Alliance Director for AWS at SS&C Blue Prism, so I'm happy to be up here to moderate with my colleagues and partners here this afternoon. So I'm going to start off with a first question for Madhu. Important question. How will the combination of AWS and SS&C Blue Prism accelerate the journey that John described for your clients and our clients together?
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for having me here. So, when I kind of look back at the art of the possible just 2 years back, just before the pandemic, right? The stuff you could do out of the box was pretty limited with digital workers. You could do the same things that you do today, but there was a lot of customization and effort that was typically required to do that. So that was the art of the possible, and it's amazing to see the signs of the doable today, where you can actually go out of the box and in a couple of days to maybe a few weeks at most, you can take extremely complex business processes on AWS and you can actually see these functioning at production level. To me, that's amazing. I'll give you 2 examples which you're seeing a lot of, and maybe Johnny can talk about this later. But basically, invoice processing, purchase order processing, you can go right out of the box. You can get that from AWS Marketplace, and then you can just very, very quickly do that for, $1 billion plus revenue company very easily in terms of what happens. And to me, that is amazing because of straight through processing, the amount of time that a machine is able to do without a human intervening in that process, that has really gone up. That percentage has gone up from, I would say, around 60% out of the box 2 years back to now very normally to 94, 95% out of the box. And that to me is amazing. And that's AI at the bottom, right? It's the Amazon Textract, Amazon Comprehend, all those things that are powering that. And so when you marry Blue Prism and AWS in this context, that becomes very powerful. Now, from a finance leader perspective, particularly what you're seeing is in the typical processes, Anthony, like order to cash, record to report, procure to pay, these kind of areas, there are maybe about 30 use cases that these CFO-owned kind of processes have. And these kind of span, most of you might be familiar with these, accounts payable, accounts receivable, financial planning and analysis, tax, treasury operations, those kinds of things. And what you're seeing is that the leaders who are doing this on AWS, they're really getting a terrific advantage from the Blue Prism AWS combination. Now, outside of finance leaders and the finance function per se, right, across multiple industries, we see sales, marketing also really benefiting. We see IT ops, contact centers, right? We see the contact center piece really working out really well in terms of digital workers. And also, foundationally, when you kind of look at it, there are a lot of cases where when there is the ability to address cost reduction and operational effectiveness both with digital workers, I think that's where that combination really helps.
Thanks, Madhu.
Let me add to that real quick. So one of the things I didn't mention is our digital exchange, which is very complementary to the AWS Marketplace. So we literally have tens of thousands of connectors, again, on the no code, right? You can just go download it, literally drag and drop it into Blue Prism. I think just from an AWS perspective, we connect natively already to over 100 AWS services. We then kind of mutually worked with a partner called NIME, which gives us the low-code ability to connect to every AWS service. So it's pretty amazing the connectivity you can get quite literally out of the box.
Excellent. Great points, John. Thanks, Madhu. Next question here is for John. So you had touched on some of this. So how will the integration of SS&C Chorus platform with Blue Prism Intelligent Automation impact how enterprises work?
It's a great question. So it's a bit of a dichotomy, which is I just showed you a very full stack, right, in terms of our intelligent automation platform going forward. I think that combination is extremely powerful. At the same time, Blue Prism has grown up around having a very large partner ecosystem, which is going to be very complementary to Chorus and what they deliver. So I think that's an aspect that all of us will take advantage of. And then the other piece is that we want to be best of breed. So we recognize that we're not going to be all things to all people. So it may be the case that a number of our customers decide to leverage component parts of our platform rather than a holistic approach. I think, frankly, that's one of our differentiators from our competition. We're fine with that. We want our customers to have access to the best of breed technologies across the board, hence our relationship with AWS.
Excellent. All right, so pivoting right now to the next question, Greg, how will clients get started?
It's actually really easy to start. It wasn't a few years ago, but we believe, and the we is AWS, the we is SS&C Blue Prism, the we are industry analysts, the we are some of those big GSI partners that you see out there, and the we more and more, 60% of our install base is looking to start with process intelligence and tools and systems that do process intelligence both at the process level and at the task mining level. If you think about it, what if instead of spending months and months, if not years, and tens of people and millions of dollars trying to find the right processes, the right tasks to automate that may or may not deliver the ROI that you need now, middle, at the end of that? What if you could instead, with process intelligence, know upfront which processes to start with, which tasks to automate, prioritize those, and know with great amount of detail, based on data in your systems, on your users' desktops, what the ROI of each of those automations will bring. So we believe process intelligence is an incredibly important place to start because it gives you a path to which processes, which tasks should I automate, what are they going to drive for me in terms of ROI, and how do I prioritize them over the life cycle of my automations.
Fantastic. So Greg, I'm going to pile on and ask you another question around that because you have previous role, you ran Blue Prism Partner channel worldwide. So how would you see our partners leveraging Blue Prism Process Intelligence to really start taking advantage of this?
Yeah, it's a great question because when I first answered your original question, I said we believe process intelligence is the place to start. And one of the biggest contributors to that we voice in the market are some of our biggest partners as well as some of our medium and small partners. Partners that are doing transformational or micro-transformational work for customers realize that they don't have the time, money, or ability to spend months or years trying to find the right processes and tasks to automate and then deciding which work, which don't work. They want to be able to say to a customer, you have a digital transformation plan. Underneath that, you have micro-transformations that you're performing over a series of years. Here's where you need to start in terms of automating those micro-transformations that will drive your larger digital transformation. So what we're seeing is almost every major GSI, almost all of the boutique firms in intelligent automation, hyper-automation, even AI and ML, are looking towards using or creating practices around process intelligence because that sets your pathway. That tells you which roads to go down and which roads will get you to that pot of gold fastest.
And real quick, Madhu, obviously you guys produced your first intelligent automation report about 6 months ago now.
Right.
Process assessment was a big piece for AWS
Yeah,
as well.
process assessment, as we call it, right? A process intelligence is another name. What is really amazing, right, is that typically you would pay large GSI organizations quite a bit in terms of trying to come in and unearth your processes and then document them. At the end of the day, right, the business units, people in those units might be saying, hey, this is how we do this process, this is how we work with this thing, etc. And the reality is, you know how when you walk in parks, they have these neatly laid out roads, and then you see this little grass thingy where somebody's just been walking around. We call that the happy path, which is they didn't go down that nice path. They took their dog, whatever they did, right? They walked off on the side, and that was the happy path. And just like that, in companies, there are happy paths. I didn't quite follow step 1 through 10. I went from 1 through 17 and back to 9, and then I did 10, right? Now, nobody's going to tell you that in an interview. However, you can find that in an event log automatically. And that, I think, is the key to the whole process intelligence. It's not just about time saving. I think it's about accuracy, about really reflecting what the truth is. In other words, it's not what people say that they're doing, but what is it that they're actually doing for a process? Where are the log jams? How can you clear up the log jams? So yeah, that was chapter 2 in the report from back in December. Thanks for bringing that up, John.
So real quick to you all, I'll just throw it out there. How can experienced clients scale their automation programs successfully, right? That's what we want to have. They want them to grow. What would be some advice that you can give some customers on how to do that?
Should start with the
I can actually take that one. Yeah, because we see this all the time. See, customers talk about intelligent automation all the time, right? It's right now one of the buzzwords du jour, intelligent automation. Hey, I've just been through the pandemic, and we are automating, and we are doing intelligent automation, right? So that's a big buzzword, but the difference between those who are talking about it and those who are actually doing it and having some success, maybe lots of success at doing it, it really comes down to a few things. And we find that that's pretty much a typical mantra in terms of what those things are that they do. The first one is really about ownership at the C-suite level. We find that the companies that are successful, they have an intelligent automation agenda. In other words, the C-suite is fully read in, and they are actually saying, hey, we are going to adopt intelligent automation. The second thing is very related to the first thing, which is they take aggressive intelligent automation goals as part of the organization. So this is so that they're not just moving organically at the pace of the org. It might be a regulated industry which moves slowly, or it might be a highly innovative industry which moves terrifically fast, but they're not organically just growing. They are actually saying, hey, I'm going to automate X% of my processes within a business unit or across business units, or I'm going to automate it such that I get that. And this is where we see they focus on the metrics. So we typically see anywhere from 20 to 60% cost reduction and anywhere from 50 to 400% plus operational effectiveness increases. And these are very, very tangible results that we're seeing across multiple industries. We deal, for example, with 22 commercial industries, and we see that almost in most of these when they kind of do this kind of thing, regardless of whether they're regulated or not. And the third aspect of this is in terms of training and the folks in the organization becoming familiar with what is intelligent automation, what can I do, what are the constraints, what can I not do, right? It's not about what you can do, but what are the things I should not be doing here? Should I be just automating a process per se, or should I be doing what Greg's talking about, which is the process intelligence piece, and trying to understand where the highest ROI is, lowest hanging fruit, and go after those. In other words, do I do the big bang digital transformation and wait to boil the ocean, which is the fourth point, by the way. They don't boil the ocean. They don't wait to find every single process which is out there and have this gargantuan plans, which we are used to, right? I'm used to doing some of that myself 10 years back. So bottom line is they don't do that. They just start straight off into, here are my top 3 ROI things that my process assessment or process intelligence tool is telling me are the right things to go after. So let me go after these, and let me go and do these things. So they start off right there. And so that is kind of really encouraging. So I would say that those are the things that I would say any mature organization which is really adopted IA, et cetera, you'll find they automatically have gravitated to this pattern of these 4 things. But back to you, Anthony.
I'll add from which is a little bit scary, I'll add from the product perspective, but only from a go-to-market perspective. Which is that scale for us right now is very interesting because one of the reasons we signed a strategic agreement with AWS was to look at our own architecture, our own product development. And so from a scale perspective, one of the things we're very focused on right now is actually creating our first software as a service offer for intelligent automation on AWS. So obviously very excited to bring that managed SaaS service to market. But beyond that, we also announced our move towards more of a true cloud native architecture. So from a scale perspective, that's effectively the next leg in our journey to get to scale and leverage AWS on that journey as well. So certainly excited to see what that portends in terms of things like consumption-based offers and a number of things we will have in short order.
The other thing, Anthony, I would say is that using process intelligence, intelligent automation, and some of the other tools, business process management and workflow management, actually brings a gap that has existed out there forever, closes it, which is you have business units that are separated from automation units, which are separated from IT. Automation and intelligent automation, process intelligence forces centers of excellence, automation groups, IT groups to understand what the others are doing, what systems drive the processes that the business units are focused on, what data sits in those systems, and how. That connection between IT and the data and the systems and the business units and the processes they're managing is drawn together by this technology. And so the ability for this technology to do that, to bring those groups together and for them to collaborate and understand what the others are doing, we're seeing that all over the place, and this technology really helps do that.
Fantastic. I think we're going to pivot now.
Yep.
And now, take it to the next level where Greg's going to show you how some of this all works. So we've got a great demo that's Greg's going to show, and then we've also got a partner and a customer who's going to come up and talk a little bit about this. So I'll turn it over to you, Greg, and the demo.
Thanks, Sam.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about process intelligence. First, what is process intelligence? And then what can process intelligence deliver? Like I said before, one of the most important concepts to understand is that process intelligence can, from a data-driven perspective, point you in the direction of where your automations are going to be most successful, which ones are going to drive the most ROI, how to prioritize and balance those automations against the goals of micro-transformations or larger digital transformations. So one of the first things to understand is there are two major components to process intelligence. And certainly within SS&C Blue Prism's process intelligence solution, which is powered by Abby Timeline, one of the things that you have to understand is that there's a process analysis or discovery aspect to process intelligence, which looks at processes, but more importantly, the underlying systems that feed and drive and nurture those processes. The log files in those systems paint the picture of which processes are taking place, where potential log jams are occurring in those processes, who's involved, what systems are involved. What process intelligence gives you a picture almost instantaneously once you've gotten the data into the system of what those processes look like, where those log jams or bottlenecks are, what are the various steps, which organizations and groups as well as systems are involved. That allows you to then start analyzing those processes to see what can be automated most effectively to drive the most ROI. There's another component which is task mining. Task mining looks at the user's contributions within those processes and flows. What are their users doing in and out of those processes, and how do we look at those, analyze those tasks to find out what we can automate or what we can improve and change. So the bottom line is that we enable, through process intelligence, users to discover, analyze, and monitor processes and tasks, prioritize those, and then analyze those for which are going to produce the biggest bang for the buck soonest. And that's critical when you talk about ultimately scaling intelligent automation. Have those early successes be profound early successes rather than searching for years and spending huge amounts of money trying to find those processes or tasks that are going to deliver the most ROI. One of the things that's exciting about process intelligence and our relationship with AWS is BPPI, SS&C Blue Prism's process intelligence solution, is the first SaaS solution we've offered on AWS. And what this allows us to do is this allows us to create insights in a cloud-delivered fashion across multiple systems, tasks, and processes. There are 4 components that are critical components in terms of what we deliver and how we at least differentiate ourselves from other process intelligence providers. Number 1 is BPPI is a truly comprehensive solution. You saw the stack that we had earlier now with SS&C Blue Prism. Think about process intelligence being both one of the bookends on the starting discovery side of intelligent automation and on the monitoring side of intelligent automation. We cover that full gamut. So process intelligence allows you to go from literally discovering processes, discovering tasks that can be automated, all the way to pushing that, and we automatically integrate with our digital workers and our digital worker platform, pushing that automatically into digital worker automations and other automations around tasks. So very few providers out there can go from discovering processes and tasks that can be highly automated to automatically pushing that into an intelligent automation platform. We cover that whole gamut. The other piece is we're also now integrating into business process workflow, intelligent document analysis. And you saw that in John's slide earlier. So the ability to cover the entire life cycle of automation, from process discovery to intelligent document processing to business process management and workflow, and automate that entire life cycle is critical, and it's what BPPI does. We also have structured the way we go to market with BPPI in a way that any customer can get a starter pack of 2 licenses of BPPI at no charge for a certain period of time. We allow our customers and prospects to actually test the value of BPPI using their data, their systems, their processes, and their tasks. We have several hundred customers now in the process of using BPPI with this starter pack at no cost, again. And already we are seeing enormous results. We have multiple customers that have produced results in less than a 3-week pilot or POV or guided evaluation. And then lastly, we can deliver in any manner, on-prem, in the cloud. Again, the BPPI solution was one of the first SaaS solutions we partnered with AWS around and can deliver now in the cloud. What kind of results can you expect if you leverage process intelligence? And these are significant results. 80% reduction in process discovery time and effort. Think about the way processes and tasks have been discovered to date. You get in a war room with a whiteboard, and you draw processes across that whiteboard, and that takes weeks, if not months. You find out what tasks feed those processes, and you determine which individuals are creating those tasks, which systems they're logging into and out of and back into. That's all done automatically. Once you feed the log files or once you sit the recording capabilities on the user's desktops, this system does all of that automatically in an extremely short period of time. And that's where you get that 80% in savings. You also get 30% faster effort in building the automations and translating that into digital workers. So we have integrated the process intelligence side with the digital worker automation side. And so everything that BPPI outputs in terms of results can automatically get pushed into digital worker automations. And that's going to save that 30%. We think that as we develop the solution more, that's going to get closer to 50 to 60%. And then finally, reduction in cost. If you think about being able to automatically determine which are the most effective automations, which are the most effective automations from a process perspective and from a task perspective, and then automatically creating that full lifecycle push into digital worker creation, that's going to save you an enormous amount of time. And I wrote down a few things because I thought this was interesting to give you some practical examples. So this example is a pharma example. It's one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. By leveraging process intelligence, they discovered 160,000 hours of repeated activities. They then were able to automate 40% of those, and they ended up with automating a full 40% of all their transactional processes. Here's a telco example, multinational telco. They identified 9 different areas of potential automation with high ROI results using process intelligence, which translated into, just in the first 6 weeks of the project, $8 million worth of savings and a 70% reduction in time. And then lastly, insurance. There's an insurance example. They discovered 99% of non-standard executions for claims, which translated into a 30% reduction in claims processing time. So just by leveraging process intelligence alone, you're seeing enormous ROI right up front. And that ends up potentially driving the success of your entire intelligent automation or hyper-automation program. With that, I'm going to take you through a quick 5-minute demo of SS&C Blue Prism Process Intelligence, and this will give you a real feel for what our solution does and how it does it. So please enjoy the recorded demo.
Blue Prism digital workers can do anything a human worker can do on a computer, often using the same user interfaces. They're also faster, never take a break or get sick, never sleep, never make a mistake, keep perfect audit logs, and are highly secure. That said, we still need to figure out what work they should be doing in the first place, and that's where Blue Prism Process Intelligence shines. The no-code interface makes it fully accessible and easy to use, and with the option to deploy in the cloud as well as on-prem, it can be ready to go in just minutes. System log data can be loaded and transformed as needed with ease through the ETL tool or through pre-built connectors. Once the data is ingested, it is automatically organized as a process model that can be immediately visualized and analyzed. Color coding makes it easy to identify bottlenecks, which can be further investigated in the bottleneck tool. In this example, we can simulate improving the bottleneck from the previous view and predict how many hours back to the business this would yield. We can also look at a frequency distribution of the paths taken to complete a given process. In this example, the straightforward happy path occurs most often, but the second most common path costs nearly twice as much. To understand why, we can set that path as a filter and drill down. The breakdown tool lets us easily analyze events. In this case, we want to identify which processor is assigned to these expensive cases, and we can quickly see who is responsible. With no coding and just a few clicks, we've gone from ingesting the data to this discovery. But why is Aaron taking a more expensive method? Maybe he doesn't know the right method, and some targeted enablement could have a large return. Or perhaps Aaron excels and is assigned the more difficult cases. Either way, we now know we want to set up a task mining recorder on his machine to learn more. To get the full picture and better understand automation opportunities, we need to be able to visualize and analyze some manual steps a user does on their computer that don't generate data or logs. This is referred to as task mining, and it provides the granular detail required to build out automations. When recording, it's critical to protect user privacy. Templates allow us to define when to record, what applications to either include or exclude, what should be obfuscated, and what text should be masked. With the data from the recordings, we can apply deep analytics. By graphing the potential gain against the complexity, for example, we can quickly determine the best candidates for automation. Blue Prism Process Intelligence deploys multiple recorders on various users' desktops, so we can capture a representative sample of how different people do tasks. This means we don't just see one happy path, but every path, including exception paths, resulting in automations that are much more resilient. Once we've selected the paths we want to include, we simply click the Export to Blue Prism button. This lets us import it into Blue Prism Capture, where we can optimize it for a digital workforce. For example, imagine a contact center agent that has to change a customer's address in 5 systems. Instead of doing each one sequentially the way a human would, 5 digital workers working in parallel could complete the task 5 times faster. Once ready, we can export it into the Blue Prism Design Studio as a skeleton, saving roughly 30% of the development time. With the automated process in production, we can use Blue Prism Process Intelligence to examine the outcomes. Here we can see that the automation has taken the bottleneck from earlier from 31 hours down to just 7, resulting in massive savings. In order to monitor both the digital workers and the larger processes they are a part of, we can use Blue Prism Process Intelligence's behavior queries. Process queries can be defined graphically without any coding or scripting, democratizing their use. Similarly, we can use the forecast tool to set up custom machine learning models to predict outcomes before they happen. Custom alerts can be triggered by these queries and forecasts, and can even directly trigger Blue Prism digital workers. This means that digital workers can dynamically be added to jobs to make sure SLAs are hit. Blue Prism Process Intelligence helps quickly discover what to automate, significantly reduces the automation development time, and then monitors automations in production. Plus, getting started is easy with free licenses for all customers on paid support. Talk to your Blue Prism rep to find out what you can achieve with the combined power of the Blue Prism Intelligent Automation Platform.
So hopefully that was helpful and gave you a view of what's possible with process intelligence and how easy it is to leverage the power of process intelligence. One of the things that you saw in John's presentation was the new stack that we have with our acquiring company SS&C. This adds some of the tools by name, some of the capabilities by name in the various functional boxes. So you can see the bookend on the left has process intelligence and process management. And then there are different places within the flow of this stack where process intelligence can come into place. In particular, one of the most unheralded capabilities within process intelligence, and certainly within BPPI, is the ability of post-deployment of your automations for process intelligence to sit within those processes and flows on users' desktops and determine, are you getting the most value out of that particular set of automations? Or are there things you missed even initially, or are there changes that have occurred? So there's both a discovery side to process intelligence and a monitoring side to process intelligence that allows you to manage a full life cycle of your automations. With that, that ends the process intelligence portion of the presentation. I'd love to answer questions after the session if you have any. And with that, we're going to bring up one of our core partners, Invoke, and Johnny Ramondino. And we're going to talk about what kind of deployments has he been involved with or seen where clients have effectively used various intelligent automation and process intelligence capabilities to deploy these automations.
I'm going to surround you.
You won't need that.
All right, go ahead. Go right in the middle.
Actually, I'll grab the clicker. Okay, so Johnny, you and I had an interesting discussion earlier about the fact that you were actually responsible for our first customer in the United States.
That's right. Before I was a partner and build a business on intelligent automation and helping companies do this, I was a customer myself. So I got to live through the journey that a lot of people are either smack in the middle of going through or are exploring to do. That's right.
That's great. And so as a starter, having had that role and then taken the leap to start your own company, maybe talk about what was the impetus for that and what were some of the business problems you thought you could solve in that endeavor?
Yeah, so there were two insights that came to us. One of them was that we realized, and this is 6-7 years ago, that there was a tidal wave of technologies, and I would say not just regular technologies, but disruptive technologies that were just going to come at us very quickly and in an accelerated pace. And not just were they becoming more available, but they also would be becoming easier to be consumed. So that was a very important element that we saw this coming. Was pretty obvious, but how big it was going to be was a big question. The second part is that we also realized that most organizations operate still in a very industrial structure. HR, IT, finance, marketing, sales, and so on. And so the ability for organizations to consume these great technologies would become a huge challenge. And so we said, well, this is perfect. We need to help these companies do that. So that was the starting point of us putting something together, creating Invoke, and really working with companies on how do we accelerate the pace of adoption and innovation.
Very interesting.
Yeah, actually, over the last 2 years, Johnny, I know you started 6 years back, but there has been a shift from just pure RPA, robotic process automation, to what we call intelligent automation now, right? Which AWS is very focused on. What were the changing customer needs that you saw, and could you kind of describe how AWS has kind of enabled you and the customer in terms of this journey that from RPA to IA?
So I think there's a few elements, right? I'll try to bucket them a little bit. The first one is the fact that the reason why it's hard to change organizational structures is because there's a lot of regulation and there's an increase of the regulation. So it makes it really hard for us to just rethink how we do business because we're literally hamstrung by what we can do. And so good example of how AWS has helped, particularly me as an organization, but as I help really large organizations try to innovate is how do you do that in a compliant, secure, regulated, controlled environment? And so that's not easy to do for any organization, but to do that with speed, it's really hard to do. And so when you think about having the ability to do this in AWS, you can be so much more flexible without having to relinquish the ability of actually making your compliance requirements happen. So that's one really big element of that. The other one is just that business requirements change. And, I think we all just went through a very significant pandemic. And I can tell you, we have had customers that suddenly had to do an influx of a few million phone calls that they had to deal with their customers because they were trying to figure out, am I going to be in business tomorrow, right? How do you deal with something like that? Well, you have to think on your feet and very quickly find an answer to, all right, how do I service, this entire new demand that just sprung up and that can go away tomorrow. That's really hard to institutionalize in any type of business without thinking about these tools that are available on demand, right? And the same is true with just changing market demands, both on a positive side, where maybe you want to enter a new area of the business or you're trying to compete. Those things, the ability to just change and either up or down your business it's just very tough to do in general, and cloud computing is just fantastic for that.
Yeah, the elasticity part.
That's exactly
that is key. That is something we hear a lot about when you're spinning up digital workers, when you need them very badly. And then maybe 3 weeks out of the month, you are not using them, but then back again, you are into, a classic example is ledger closing, right? General ledger closing, and that's right at the end of the month, and then you're back again. Yeah. So yeah, cloud's very key for that. Hey, I was curious about the whole marketplace thing and how customers are viewing that from your context. I mean, you have done some of the pioneering work around SaaSification of digital workers on AWS, especially for invoice processing and purchase order processing. Some comments?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most organizations are realizing that they need to have this capability in their own organization. How do we build these great solutions around understanding our processing, automating our processes? But then there's a secondary layer where the ability then to completely end-to-end drive process automation sometimes require you not just to know one tool, but like 8 or 9 tools, right? And so what we have done is we've tried to figure out how do we make it easier in those instances to adopt, again, the solutions. And so we're already saying, instead of you having to reinvent the wheel, well, we've done this 100 times, let us package these things up, and you can kind of purchase already pre-made solutions that we can now adapt to your business rules, but you don't have to start from scratch. And so we're finding this combination where you have part of the marketplace and some of the use cases where it makes sense for you to build them yourself, adopt these technologies yourselves, and then there's all sorts of other use cases where why would you spend the energy and time to do that? Purchase as a service and go tomorrow. You're up and running, and so we're seeing a nice bifurcation around that, particularly slanted towards where you have multiple disruptive technologies coming together. It makes it easier to start with a template or with already a pre-developed solution around that. So we're seeing some good market demand around that.
Yeah, certainly, John.
No, that's great. I was actually going to say, so effectively you kind of have 3 business models. You have kind of classic implementation, right? And they need your help to implement. You've got your own RPA as a service solution, kind of end to end, and then you've got a point solution or several, right? Are you seeing the point solutions as a potential pull through from a customer perspective, where they're kind of dipping their toe in automation, if you will, and then have interest in your wider platform?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I think organizations that haven't gone down the path of automation before, it's a fantastic way to get value immediately, right? Because as you all know, right, you get started with something new, you never invest enough money to get started, right? Because people, let's not do the multi-million-dollar, multi-year initiatives. Let's just try this out in a small environment. Well, you don't have enough talent, don't have enough people, you don't buy enough of the licenses, and as a result, you're tinkering. Well, what you can do with these pre-built solutions is, we just buy a package that already works, and now I turn it on and see the value. Now I can actually make the business case that, hey, let's go a little bit bigger because this actually returns fantastic results. Right. So it's a really good way to get started there.
That's great. We actually have one slide, which was an example we've talked about. So love to hear a little bit about kind of the WEX story, just kind of real quick, who they are, challenge, solution. You talked about spike in demand, clearly. They had one.
Yeah, very interesting. So for those people that don't know who WEX is, WEX is a fintech company, I don't know, $2-3 billion fintech company. And if you've ever booked your travel on Expedia, as an example, Expedia doesn't use your credit card to do so. They actually create an instant temporary credit card number to reserve your hotel. So WEX, one of their many things that they do is that they are the fastest instant credit card generation company, right? So they'll just instantly create a credit card, hold your hotel reservation or airfare reservation on file until everything's done, and then obviously you can replace it with your credit card. So that's one of the things it does. So millions and millions of actual financial transactions go through it with WEX. And there's so many more things that they do as a fintech company. Don't do them justice, but they operate a lot of the money that's going around in the US as an example and globally. Now, the challenge that you're seeing in front of you is a very interesting one because it really speaks to this combination of agility, speed, and how do you solve a critical business problem. And it was one that was fantastic for WEX because they just had, at that point, closed the largest deal that they had ever sold. And, really large customer, for them it was just a market-defining, complete change for the transaction. Now, what the actual activity was is they were going to have to create 1.1 new customers in credit cards. So, imagine if you want to apply for a credit card, that's not a 2-minute situation as an individual, and the amount of information you have to give to apply for a credit card. Well, let's say it's about, giving your kidney in terms of the amount of information you have to give. So they were going to have to create 1.1 million of those. And the customer was expecting to do this in about, 3 months. Yep. And when they looked at this, they said, we've never done this before. Right. Like at that scale, it was multiple order of magnitudes in terms of scale that they had to do. On top of it, they didn't even know if their systems would be able to handle it, let alone their process. So we analyzed what was going on, and we quickly realized that they would require at a minimum about 6 months to process all of this information, which would not only be a big challenge in terms of workload and what have you, but literally would put the deal that they had, the gain here, at risk, because the customer had already stopped their engagement. And, this would be a really big problem for them. So we had to come together very quickly to think on our feet and provide a solution. And so we looked at cobbling together several solutions, spun up an entire environment to support this on AWS, and worked on kind of the combination of solving the problem, which was, understanding the data, cleansing that data, both from a technology transformational side, right? Let me make sure all the data points add up, but also from a business perspective, like Trifecta was mentioned here. Like Trifecta was a good solution to actually work with business people to say, hey, this field doesn't add up, this value doesn't add up. Let me make sure that you understand. Can you help me clean that data so that we can move forward? And then ultimately moving that data into the systems where the systems that were out there, think about it, is if you have to go and apply to many systems where all the data needs to be in there to get a credit card, you don't have interfaces, right? So you're keying this stuff in. At best, you maybe have some sort of integration points. And so we're having digital workers run around the clock 24/7 and just scale them up. And in about 3 months, we were able to completely transition this. So from day one that we heard that the issue was there, all the way through the execution being done, it was 9 to 12 weeks that we completed that. So fantastic results.
That's amazing. It's interesting because one of the things we don't talk about enough, I don't think, is the speed at which you can move with intelligent automation. So you think about back to the pandemic, right? We had partners who had a PPP solution up literally in days, right? We had people that were doing COVID testing in a matter of weeks. So it's absolutely amazing what you can do.
And this is where this combination of these powerful tools like intelligent automation, and we talked about this acronym, intelligent automation. I mean, there's so many tools when we look at this acronym that are in there, right? Yeah. You're reading documents, understanding emails or conversations, to literally keying stuff into your systems and into websites, right? So there's so many different ones. And there's so many available already on the AWS platform that you can integrate with and leverage with. The possibilities are endless. And then on top of that, combining that quickly is the art form, right? How do you use all of those tools efficiently so that you can drive to something that's really complex in a very simple, in a very fast environment? That's the key element of that.
That's great.
Hey, Johnny, I know we're down to our last 5 minutes, so maybe very quickly so we can go to some questions. Next 2 years, what are your thoughts on where the intelligent automation industry and Invoke, right, where you folks are going with customers? What do you see is going to be the big kind of sea change that's going to happen?
All right, well, you've heard it here first, right? I'll give this a try. So, My prediction is as follows. There's two categories. There's the category of businesses and the category of product developers that I think I would focus on. From a business perspective, I think it's going to be a core component of your capability stack and technology that you're going to have, not only cloud and cloud capabilities, but also intelligent automation capabilities. And where those organizations that have been doing that today, if it's not already part of their number one opportunity that they leverage, it's going to move up the rank. Because a lot of the approaches that people take today, or organizations take today, and even internal IT takes today, is that if I can't solve it any other way, I'm going to use intelligent automation. But everything that I've just explained makes it the other way around.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do quickly, fast, solve the problem, move on.
Right.
So I think there's absolutely that happening with businesses. And then I think the other element that I think we're going to see is that product companies, solutions that are coming on the market, they've largely taken a development approach and then said, let me add something. Let me add an AI component. Hey, we've got this great tool, this great SaaS solution. By the way, we've got this AI thing that'll do something for you. So almost looked at it in the same way as businesses, we also have that.
Right.
And I think there's going to be a big shift where intelligent automation is not only going to be more embedded into the core of that product development, but it's going to take the lead on product development.
Right.
Because why would you not go low code as it matures and so on?
Right.
Why would you not take advantage of AI as the starting point of your product development? It just makes so much sense. So I think the future is bright when it comes to intelligent automation.
Awesome.
I'll end as I always do. You lack enthusiasm, Johnny, but thanks for trying. So we've got 3 minutes left. I'll open it up if anybody has any questions. We can use this handheld if we need to.
Anybody? The brave ones? Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Go ahead.
So with this customer success story that you have here, how often do you have a use case like this where the fixed solution is something that you can also like kind of pick up and lift and shift to another potential client with client?
Question. Repeat the question.
Yeah, very good question. So the question was, we have this customer use case, and the question is then, how often do you have scenarios where you can take something that you've built for one use case and can lift and shift it to another? Mixed answer, right? So we are literally going through another migration right now of a major customer with the same customer. So we are reusing a lot of what we have built from that perspective, but that's very individual company specific, right? And I will add to that, because it is important when you think about Blue Prism. One of the things that's fantastic is once you actually build something to interact with one of your systems, you just reuse that in everything that you do, right? So you get faster at the automation cycle the more that you automate. So every one of these processes, you reuse a lot of that goes within the organization. The second thing, which I think you're asking, is what if you wanted to go from one company to another? Can you reuse that? And so the examples, I think Madhu was saying this earlier, where we have examples like cash application, purchase order processing, invoice processing, a lot of the generic, if you will, or very common use cases around, processes that businesses are forming. There's best practices around these, and you can start building a lot of these libraries in there. And so we find that when we do, for example, invoice processing, we're taking about 60 to 70% of the actual work that we've already implemented, and the rest is really configuring the business rules, configuring to your specific systems and whatever exceptions and alerts you want to take. And we're growing that for every one of these processes continuously. So there's a bit of an art form to that, but that's absolutely very much in the realm of possible.
Yeah, I'd also like to chime in on this, because AWS actually, we are focusing on what we call solution responses. So if you look up AWS solutions online, you're going to see a bunch of solutions under intelligent automation, and that is growing like crazy. And the reason it's growing like crazy is for the same reasons Johnny is saying. We are finding, like I said, there are 30 use cases in just Office of the CFO. Now, no matter what CFO we talk to, these are the same 30 use cases. Hey, why not have a solution template that will address these 30 use cases for you and be able to help you kind of implement those in days or weeks at most, right? So that is a tack we are taking. The same thing goes for something like legal contract management, right? We are seeing that in that area. We are seeing this across multiple areas. In fact, when you look at it, our top 50 use cases that we see them across all 22 commercial industries and 8 public sector industries. And therefore, this is something where we are systematically already are beginning to look at it and actually provide solutions. And the other part of this, Johnny, I wanted to kind of share on that is Just like Johnny's company, Invoke, has put stuff on Marketplace, and these are SaaS consumable, right? They are consumable where you don't have to set up the infrastructure on your end. We are seeing that that is becoming more and more of a thing, right? Where customers want to try it out. They want a proof of value period, and they want to do this. So again, great.
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you for your
Thank you,
question.
everybody. Thanks for your question. Any questions further?
By the way,
We're
we'll
outside.
be outside.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, with a drink, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Thank you, John.